There are stories that lie outside the official memory, lines of text buried in the shadows, only visible when we look through the dust of time. In the 12th century, a group of knights in white robes marked with a red cross, those we now call the Knights Templar, came to Jerusalem not only to guard the pilgrim roads, but as if they were searching for something deeper beneath the earth. It is said that in their early years, while quartered within the grounds of Solomon's temple, they dug into ancient tunnels and touched relics that even the Bible dared not name. Perhaps it was treasure of gold and silver, perhaps scrolls filled with secret writings, or perhaps a kind of knowledge never meant to be revealed. And from that moment, a small band of warrior monks transformed into a force of power, financial, spiritual, and mysterious, stretching across Europe. Was this only the strange turn of history? Or is there a hidden truth that has been carefully kept in silence for more than 8 centuries? Welcome to Historic Sleep. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. The story begins in the dust and heat of the Holy Land, in a city that even in the 12th century seemed to breathe with layers of forgotten time. Jerusalem was not merely a place on a map. It was a living symbol, a crossroads of faiths, blood, and longing. For Christians of medieval Europe, the city was more than stone walls and crowded streets. It was the physical touchpoint of heaven on earth, the place where the footsteps of Christ had once pressed into soil. To control it meant more than ruling a territory. It meant touching eternity. After the First Crusade in 1099, the city was seized, but it was far from safe. Pilgrims still flocked there, desperate to walk the Via Dolorosa, to kneel at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Yet the roads that wound through the Levant were treacherous. Ambushes, bandits, and desert raiders cut down travelers in numbers that left Europe shaken. It was in this chaos that a small brotherhood of knights made their vow, not to conquer kingdoms, not to collect wealth, but to protect the pilgrims on their journey. They took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience like monks, but carried swords and shields like soldiers. They were called the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, a name that would later contract into something far more enduring: the Knights Templar. What set them apart was not only their unusual dual life of monk and warrior, but the place where they made their home. They were granted quarters in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which in that time was believed by crusaders to stand on the site of the ancient Temple of Solomon. To medieval minds, this was no coincidence. The temple was the dwelling of God's glory, the sanctuary that once held the Ark of the Covenant, the chest said to contain the tablets of Moses. Even though centuries had buried the structure beneath ruins, the name itself carried a weight of awe. And now, these new guardians of pilgrims found themselves living on top of one of the most sacred and most enigmatic sites in human history. For 9 years, the Templars remained a small and almost invisible group. 9 years, an odd stretch of time that whispers of deliberation rather than accident. Few records tell us exactly what they were doing in those early years. Chroniclers in Europe barely mention them at all. But legends say that while the surface of Jerusalem was alive with the noise of markets and soldiers, the Templars were moving underground. Beneath the Temple Mount stretched chambers and tunnels, some natural, some carved by hands whose names were long forgotten. There, by torchlight, it is said they searched. Search for what? The question has followed them like a shadow for centuries. Some say they dug for treasure left from King Solomon's time, gold hidden when Babylon swept through Jerusalem. Others imagine scrolls, texts so ancient they could rewrite the faiths of the world, writings of prophets who spoke in fire and mystery. A few even suggest they sought the Ark itself, that radiant vessel said to level cities with divine power, to kill any unworthy who touched it. In the medieval mind, such a possibility was not absurd, it was terrifyingly real. And here is where the strangeness begins. Once those 9 years passed, the Templars emerged transformed. Suddenly, they were not a nameless order scraping by in the desert. They were recognized by the Pope, granted extraordinary privileges that freed them from the control of bishops and kings. Wealth poured toward them. Nobles donated lands and castles. Pilgrims entrusted them with fortunes. In a span of decades, this once humble brotherhood became a vast network stretching across Europe, as powerful in finance as they were on the battlefield. Historians often explain it as the natural reward of discipline and service. Yet to those who saw it happen, it seemed almost like magic, as though they had brought something out of the earth of Jerusalem that changed their destiny forever. What knowledge could raise poor knights into lords of Europe? Was it simply the mastery of banking, letters of credit, the medieval precursor to checks, that gave them power? Or was there something else, something they carried hidden, a fragment of truth that kings and popes could not ignore? In old tales whispered by chroniclers, it is said that certain Templars spoke with a confidence not found in ordinary soldiers, as if they knew secrets no one else dared mention. Symbols began to appear in their chapels, strange patterns of geometry, circles within circles, stars aligned in ways that hinted at the heavens. Some of these could be dismissed as decoration, but others, like the perfect 5-pointed star carved into stone, or the endless knot patterns, hinted at ideas flowing far older than Christian Europe, ideas that smelled of Egypt, of Babylon, of the desert mysteries whispered among scholars of Kabbalah. The question grows heavier when we remember the silence of those 9 years under the temple. Silence in history often means erasure, and erasure often hides intention. If the Templars did indeed uncover something beneath Jerusalem, they guarded it with their lives. They shared it with no outsider. And yet, from that moment on, their order walked with an aura of unshakable destiny, as if they had touched something more enduring than steel or stone. So we circle back to the dust and heat of that ancient city, to the image of torches flickering underground, and armored men kneeling in narrow tunnels carved centuries before them. What did they see there? What did they bring out into the light of day, only to cloak it in secrecy? And why, across 800 years, does the question still cling to their name like a shadow that refuses to fade? If the Templars began as poor monks and ended as legends, then perhaps the key lies not in their swords or their vows, but in the silence beneath the temple. What was buried there that changed the course of history? If one stands today upon the vast platform of the Temple Mount, The sense of layered time is almost overwhelming. The stones themselves seem older than memory, stacked by hands whose names history has swallowed. Pilgrims look upward toward the dome of the rock, glittering with golden light, and few ever think of what lies beneath their feet. Yet for the Knights Templar, the earth below the surface may have been the true prize. Beneath the mount lies a hidden world. Tunnels, cisterns, chambers, and passages cut into bedrock. Some are known, some half-collapsed, and others are still rumors carried in the voices of explorers who swear they felt air moving from unseen depths. In the 12th century, these subterranean spaces were already ancient. Generations of conquerors had come and gone, leaving new layers of stone on top of older ones, until the ground became a labyrinth of history itself. To the Templars, sworn to protect but also possessed of strange purpose, these dark places may have held more value than the shining shrines above. Chroniclers of the Crusades rarely spoke of what the knights did in their early years, but scattered across old manuscripts and letters, hints survive. A monk named William of Tyre, writing in the late 12th century, mentioned the order and their residence in what he called the Temple of the Lord. He noted their odd seclusion, the way they seemed busy with tasks invisible to outsiders. Later writers would expand these small details into grand legends, that the Templars dug beneath their quarters, breaking into buried passages that had been untouched for 1,000 years. Imagine the scene: armored men setting aside their swords to take up pickaxes, lowering torches into cracks of stone, feeling the breath of cooler air rising from below. They were not masons by trade, but determination can outlast skill. Some stories claim they uncovered chambers lined with dust but empty of all else. Others say they found hidden repositories, caches left behind by priests when the temple fell to Babylon. One recurring tale suggests that they followed tunnels leading dangerously close to the very rock upon which the Temple of Solomon once stood, the legendary foundation stone itself. The foundation stone, known to Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, was believed to be the axis of the world, the point from which creation began, and the place where heaven touched earth. To stand above it was to stand at the center of cosmic mystery. For the Templars to be quartered, there was already charged with meaning. For them to dig beneath it, that opened questions that stretch into realms of both faith and forbidden knowledge. Whispers of what they sought, and perhaps found, began to circulate even in their own time. Some claimed the Templars discovered relics of the first temple, objects of pure holiness. Others said they unearthed documents, secret writings too dangerous to be revealed. A more fantastical tale speaks of hidden machines, ancient devices of wisdom, remnants of an age when divine and human knowledge had not yet separated. The most enduring claim, however, is that they sought the Ark of the Covenant itself, the chest of acacia wood said to hold the tablets of the law, covered with a lid of gold where two cherubim faced each other. The Ark was more than a relic. It was power incarnate, capable of leveling walls and striking armies blind. If it was anywhere in the world, logic suggested it could only be here, beneath the ruins of Solomon's temple. Centuries later, travelers and explorers would attempt to map the underworld of the Mount. In the 19th century, British officer Charles Warren documented shafts and water channels beneath the platform, describing them with awe and unease. He spoke of passages that seemed to lead nowhere, and chambers sealed by rubble that had lain untouched since antiquity. His reports revived the old whispers. Had the Templars once stood in these same places, their torches flickering across the same silent stones? Archaeology today treads carefully in this contested ground, where faith and politics collide at every step. Much of the subterranean world remains unstudied, locked away under religious and cultural protections. But the absence of clarity only feeds the legend. It leaves room for the imagination to picture what the Templars could have unearthed. Scrolls of forgotten scripture, maps pointing beyond the known world, or relics charged with mystical force. And then there is the puzzle of their transformation. When the Templars emerged from their obscure beginnings after those silent 9 years, they seemed already prepared for greatness. They had knowledge of routes and trade unseen by other knights. They had a strange confidence in negotiation with rulers, and soon they held a grasp of money and credit that reshaped the medieval economy. Could such skills have been learned merely by accident, or were they inheritors of a secret legacy found beneath the temple? One detail is especially curious. Later Masonic traditions, often linked to Templar survival, speak of hidden chambers of initiation, underground spaces where light and darkness played symbolic roles. The echo of tunnels beneath the Temple Mount lingers in these rites, as if the memory of digging and discovering never fully disappeared, but was transformed into ritual. If this is true, then the underground journey of the Templars was not only physical, but spiritual, a descent into shadow to return with hidden light. But we must ask, if they found something, what became of it? No medieval account openly states the treasure of Solomon was uncovered. No chronicler writes of the Ark carried away. And yet, the sudden rise of the order, the aura of mystery surrounding them, and the fragments of legend that persist all suggest that something did happen below the Temple Mount. Something never spoken, but never forgotten. The silence of stone does not answer. It leaves us with echoes, with whispers, with the enduring image of armored monks walking into narrow passages carved long before their birth. What did they see by torchlight in those hidden depths? What did they carry up into the open air of Jerusalem, only to seal it behind vows of secrecy? And if the Templars' destiny was forever altered by those nights beneath the Temple Mount, then the question becomes larger still. Was it the earth that gave them treasure? Or was it the knowledge buried within that treasure that changed the course of Europe? Legends are stubborn things. They cling to ruins, to whispers, to the corners of memory where facts grow thin. And among the legends of Jerusalem, none shines brighter or more dangerously than the treasure of King Solomon. For the Knights Templar, whose very name tied them to his ancient temple, the idea of hidden wealth beneath the stones was more than a tale. It was a possibility. King Solomon, remembered as both wise and wealthy beyond measure, was said to have commanded riches that defied imagination. Gold poured into his halls, ivory and spices flowed from distant lands, and above all, he built the temple, a structure meant not just for worship, but as a vault of the divine. Within it, the Ark of the Covenant rested, a chest said to radiate with the presence of God. But the temple was destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed again, and through centuries of conquest, the fate of its treasures blurred into mystery. Some whispered that priests had hidden them before Babylon's siege, burying them deep where no invader could reach. Others claimed the sacred objects were carried away to secret lands, spirited off by chosen guardians who vanished into the wilderness. By the time the Crusaders reached Jerusalem, the temple was long gone, replaced by layers of shrines and ruins. Yet in the medieval imagination, the treasure remained, sleeping beneath the surface, waiting for those bold or foolish enough to seek it. The Templars, living atop the ruins, became the most likely candidates. Stories began to circulate that the knights unearthed scrolls, parchments as fragile as dust, written in languages few in the 12th century could even recognize. Some claimed they were texts from the time of Solomon himself, filled with rituals of power, formulae of sacred geometry, and names of angels that could command the elements. To the common believer, such stories sounded like heresy or sorcery. To the initiated, they sounded like access to knowledge that had survived the flood of history. Among the most intriguing parallels comes from the discovery, centuries later, of the Dead Sea Scrolls near Qumran. Hidden in jars, these ancient texts revealed glimpses of forgotten traditions, sects, and scriptures that reshaped our understanding of the ancient world. If such writings could survive in caves for 2,000 years, could similar scrolls have survived beneath the Temple Mount? And if the Templars found them, how would they have understood or guarded them? The idea of hidden scrolls links to another legend, the Copper Scroll, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which reads like a treasure map, listing locations of immense hoards of gold and silver buried in secret places. Some scholars dismiss it as symbolic, others take it literally. If rumors of such texts had filtered into medieval times, it could explain why the Templars' supposed digging was spoken of with such fascination. But beyond gold and silver, what if the true treasure was knowledge? Imagine knights, unlearned in languages of antiquity, stumbling upon manuscripts written in Hebrew, Aramaic, or even more ancient tongues. They might not have understood them immediately, but Europe in the 12th century had scholars hungry for wisdom. Jewish mystics, Muslim philosophers, and Christian monks alike wrestled with ideas drawn from Greece, Babylon, and beyond. In such a climate, even fragments of forgotten writings could ignite revolutions of thought. Some accounts go further, hinting at objects more physical, a chalice, perhaps, believed to be the very cup of the Last Supper, the seed of the Grail legends that would entwine themselves with Templar lore. Others mention fragments of the true cross, or relics of saints hidden away for protection. Yet the most persistent claim circles back to the Ark. Could the Templars have uncovered even a trace of it? If not the Ark itself, perhaps the space where it once rested, the Holy of Holies. To touch such a place would have been enough to alter their sense of mission forever. From these whispers grows the image of the Templars not merely as warriors, but as keepers of something older and more powerful than any crown. Their rapid rise in influence begins to look less like fortune and more like destiny. Kings trusted them with money. Popes shielded them from local control. They seemed untouchable, as if guarded by more than armor, as if they carried a secret that made rulers hesitate before crossing them. The mythology spread quickly. Troubadours in Europe sang of hidden treasures, of knights who guarded mysteries that could upend the world. In some versions, they were holy guardians, in others they were dangerous sorcerers. The dual image of the Templars, as both protectors and conspirators, was born from this fertile soil of uncertainty. And yet we have no inventory, no surviving list of what they might have found. Silence stretches across the centuries. Did they hide it too well? Did they pass it on in coded rituals, in symbols carved into Gothic cathedrals? Or was it all imagination, stories born because human minds cannot resist filling silence with wonder? Consider the great cathedrals of France, Chartres, Reims, Notre Dame. Many were funded or influenced by the Templars. Within their soaring arches, hidden among stained glass and carvings, appear symbols that do not fit neatly into Christian doctrine. Stars of David, labyrinths, alchemical patterns. To some, these are echoes of the knowledge the Templars may have carried back from Jerusalem, reminders in stone of something they dared not write openly. The treasure of Solomon may never be confirmed, but the legend remains, pulsing beneath the surface of history. It asks us to imagine knights lowering themselves into darkness, to picture scrolls crackling at the touch of air after 1,000 years, to wonder if objects of unimaginable power passed briefly through their hands. Whether gold or parchment, relic or revelation, what mattered wasn't possession, but transformation. For when the Templars returned to Europe, they were not the same men who had set out. Something had changed. And so the question lingers. Was their true treasure measured in weight, or in the invisible currency of knowledge? Did the knights carry with them coins and relics, or did they return with ideas? Seeds that would blossom in secret societies, in architecture, in myths that still haunt us today. If treasure lay at the root of their rise, then perhaps the next step is not to ask what they found, but how they used it. Did it give them power merely in gold, or in the far subtler realm of influence over minds and empires? History often hides its most curious truths in plain sight. When we trace the path of the Knights Templar after their obscure beginnings in Jerusalem, what emerges is not the picture of a poor order struggling for survival, but the astonishing rise of a brotherhood that seemed to leap from poverty into unshakable power. Within a few decades, they transformed from nameless monks with swords into the richest and most feared military order in Christendom. To many, this rise was so sudden, so improbable, that it suggested something more than hard work or divine favor. It suggested that they possessed knowledge or resources unseen by the world around them. The transformation began quietly. Donations of land trickled in from pious nobles, grateful for the protection the Templars offered to pilgrims. But soon the trickle became a flood. Lords surrendered entire estates to the order. Kings granted them privileges, and common folk entrusted them with money and goods. The Templars became not only guardians of travelers, but guardians of wealth. They created a system of letters of credit that allowed a pilgrim to deposit money in one commandery in Europe and withdraw it safely in Jerusalem. It was, in essence, a medieval form of banking. Simple to describe today, but revolutionary at the time. Such innovation did not appear out of thin air. Knights were not merchants, and monks were not financiers. Yet somehow, the Templars wove together both worlds. Some historians point to Jewish and Muslim influences in the Holy Land, where traditions of trade and finance were far more advanced. Others suggest they may have uncovered ancient writings in Jerusalem, perhaps documents describing systems of credit, accounting, or even mathematics unknown to the Latin West. Whether through observation or discovery, the result was the same. A network of wealth that rivaled kings. By the mid-12th century, their power was unmistakable. They owned castles, fields, vineyards, mills. They controlled trade routes and fortresses across the Mediterranean. Their holdings stretched from Portugal to the Holy Land, forming a map of influence that looked less like a religious order and more like the blueprint of an empire. Kings borrowed money from them. Popes exempted them from taxes. Their ships crossed seas carrying cargo under their own flag, untouchable by most enemies. And yet, even with all this visible power, there was always something shadowed about them. Chroniclers hinted that the Templars carried secrets. Their rule, their rituals, their inner teachings were closed to outsiders. Initiation into the order was private, spoken in oaths that left new members bound to silence. This secrecy fueled suspicion. Whispers grew that their knowledge was not limited to finance or war, but extended into matters spiritual, even forbidden. Some accused them of learning hidden sciences in Jerusalem, astronomy that bordered on astrology, geometry that held symbolic power, even alchemy that promised to turn lead into gold. Others believed they had absorbed teachings from Jewish mystics, Sufi sages, or remnants of Gnostic sects, ideas that Christianity had long branded as heresy. Whether true or not, the Templars carried themselves with an air of certainty that set them apart from other knights. They seemed less like servants of kings than like men who answered only to a higher, hidden authority. The symbols carved into their chapels added to the enigma. Circles, stars, and patterns of sacred geometry appeared in stone and glass. These designs hinted at knowledge not entirely Christian, knowledge of the cosmos, of cycles, of the balance between opposites. To the common eye, they were decorations. To those with imagination, they were codes. Could these symbols have been fragments of what they had uncovered beneath the Temple Mount? Were they reminders, etched in stone, of truths too dangerous to speak aloud? The timing of their rise deepens the mystery. 9 years of silence in Jerusalem, followed by a sudden recognition from the Pope, then an unstoppable ascent across Europe. It reads less like coincidence and more like the unfolding of a plan. If they had indeed discovered ancient knowledge in Jerusalem, perhaps those 9 years were spent studying, translating, or securing it. Perhaps the privileges they received from Rome were not mere rewards, but acknowledgments of what they carried. A pope might hesitate to defy knights who held secrets capable of shaking the very foundations of the Church. By the 13th century, the Templars stood at the height of their influence. They were bankers, warriors, shipowners, diplomats. They were monks who rode into battle with swords drawn, but who also counted coins and balanced ledgers in quiet halls across Europe. To their supporters, they were protectors of Christendom. To their enemies, they were too powerful, too independent, and too mysterious. And power breeds suspicion. Rumors began to circulate that the Templars did not pray as other Christians prayed, that they whispered strange invocations at midnight, that they possessed relics not shown to the world, skulls that spoke, heads of prophets, objects of power brought from the East. Some accused them of worshipping Baphomet, a figure never clearly defined but wrapped in fear and shadow. Whether these charges were slander, misunderstanding, or the distorted echo of real secrets, they left a stain that would never fully wash away. The speed and scale of their rise demanded explanation. For common folk, it was easiest to imagine treasure, gold taken from beneath Solomon's temple, filling the coffers of the order. For poets and storytellers, it was more thrilling to imagine knowledge, scrolls, relics, or even mystical initiation that gave the knights wisdom beyond their time. For kings, it was threatening enough simply that these monks with swords answered to no crown but their own. Thus the question deepens. Was the Templars' power built on practical genius, or was it the shadow of something they had carried from the depths of Jerusalem? Did they rise because of banking, discipline, and courage, or because they held a secret that made them untouchable until the day envy and fear caught up with them? The Templars walked through Europe cloaked in both reverence and dread. They were praised as defenders of the faith, yet suspected as keepers of forbidden lore. They were monks of poverty, yet they handled more wealth than most kingdoms. They were knights of Christ, yet accused of heresy. In this paradox lies the heart of their mystery. And it is here we must pause to ask, what secret could be powerful enough to turn poor knights into masters of kings, and yet dangerous enough to doom them when the winds of fortune shifted? Among the many myths that twine themselves around the Knights Templar, none has proven as enduring or as elusive as the Holy Grail. It is a symbol so charged with meaning that it has outgrown its medieval roots, passing through centuries of poetry, romance, and speculation until it stands today as a vessel of ultimate mystery. To some, it is a chalice, the very cup from which Christ drank at the Last Supper. To others, it is not an object at all, but a symbol of divine knowledge, hidden truth, or even the spark of eternal life. And somehow, across all these versions, the Templars are never far from its shadow. The first whispers of the Grail appeared in the late 12th century in the romances of Chrétien de Troyes. He described a wondrous object carried in a procession, glowing with otherworldly light. Later poets and storytellers expanded the image, connecting it to the cup that caught Christ's blood during the crucifixion. The Grail became the most sought-after relic in Christendom, a quest object for knights of Arthurian legend, a symbol of purity and divine favor. But curiously, these tales surfaced just as the Templars were rising in power, and over time, the two stories fused. Why? Perhaps it was the aura of secrecy surrounding the order. Knights who vanished beneath the Temple Mount for years, who emerged wealthy and mysterious, who carved strange symbols into their chapels. Such men seemed the perfect candidates to be guardians of a hidden relic. If the Grail existed anywhere, it would be in their keeping. The notion was irresistible, and from it grew a whole branch of legend that persists even now. Some tales imagine the Templars as literal keepers of the cup, moving it from fortress to fortress, hiding it as their enemies closed in. Montségur, the Cathar stronghold in southern France, is one such site, said to have been linked with Templar allies who spirited away a sacred object before the fortress fell. Others point to Scotland, where after the order's fall in France, remnants may have carried their treasures, including the Grail, into hidden chapels or caves beneath Rosslyn. In each version, the Grail survives not as a museum piece, but as a living symbol, safeguarded by those who believe the world is not ready for its revelation. But the Grail is slippery, and its meaning shifts depending on who tells the story. For poets, It was a test of purity, a quest no flawed knight could complete. For mystics, it was knowledge, esoteric truth hidden in the form of a vessel, a cup that contained not liquid, but wisdom itself. In this reading, the Grail was not a thing to be touched, but a state of being to be attained. And here the connection to the Templars grows even more suggestive. If they indeed found ancient scrolls or mystical teachings beneath the Temple Mount, then perhaps what they guarded was not a cup of gold, but a body of knowledge that could change the way men saw the world. Think of the symbols again. Circles, stars, labyrinths. These are not decorations for soldiers. They are teaching tools, reminders of a hidden path. In medieval mysticism, the circle stood for unity, the labyrinth for the journey of the soul, the star for the balance of heaven and earth. If the Templars embedded these into their buildings, were they leaving hints of a deeper quest, their own version of the Grail? Some traditions even suggest that the Grail was not Christian in origin at all, but older, woven into Celtic or pagan mythology, long before it was baptized by the stories of Arthur and Christ. A vessel of endless abundance, a cauldron of rebirth, a symbol of the earth's hidden powers. When the Crusaders marched into the East, they brought with them these tales, and in the charged atmosphere of Jerusalem, where ancient myths converged, the Grail became something new. The Templars, standing at the crossroads of East and West, may have been the bridge by which the Grail legend transformed, merging biblical echoes with pagan roots into the enduring myth we know today. Yet for all the stories, the Grail has never appeared. No chalice unearthed, no scroll authenticated, no relic unveiled. Still the legend will not die. It clings to the Templars because the order itself ended in mystery. When they were suppressed in 1307, when their leaders were burned, when their treasure was said to vanish into the night, the Grail simply slipped into that absence, filling the void of explanation with a story of its own. Even today, seekers trace paths across Europe, from ruined commanderies to hidden valleys, hoping to find a glimmer of truth. Rosslyn Chapel, with its carvings of vines and stars, remains a magnet for those who believe the Grail, or the secret it represents, lies within its stone. Montségur, the Pyrenean fortress, still draws pilgrims who whisper that on the night of its fall, a small band of men carried away the Grail into the dark. Each site becomes a doorway, not to history, but to a story that refuses to end. Perhaps the most compelling idea is that the Grail was never meant to be found, that it was, from the beginning, a parable, a mirror of the human search for meaning. The Templars, with their blend of devotion, secrecy, and power, became the perfect human vessel for the story, embodying the paradox of the Grail itself, something visible yet invisible, tangible yet untouchable, worldly yet divine. So we are left with an image, a knight in a white mantle with a red cross, kneeling in a dim chapel, not before gold or jewel-encrusted treasure, but before a cup of simple design, its surface plain yet radiant in the light of a single candle. Was it real? Or was it the reflection of something greater? The idea that within the silence of stone and the secrecy of vows, there exists a vessel of knowledge, waiting for those who dare to seek? The Grail story, tied so tightly to the Templars, pushes us toward the deeper question. If the Order truly guarded something beyond gold and relics, what was its nature? Was it a vessel of faith, a storehouse of ancient wisdom, or something far stranger? Knowledge that could rewrite the very foundations of power? When we walk into a Gothic cathedral, the air itself seems to shift. Light spills through stained glass in fractured colors, lifting the eyes upward as if the building itself insists on pulling the soul toward heaven. The arches soar, the stone bends as though defying gravity, and everywhere there is a sense of rhythm, lines and patterns that whisper of hidden order. These cathedrals were not merely places of worship, they were instruments of mystery. And standing quietly behind their construction, one finds again the shadow of the Knights Templar. The Templars were not the only builders of the Gothic age, but they were among the most influential. Their commanderies and supporters funded the rise of these vast churches across Europe. Chartres, Reims, Notre Dame, Amiens, each of them carried echoes of geometry too precise to be accidental. Circles within squares, triangles aligned with celestial events, labyrinths set into floors, where pilgrims traced symbolic journeys with their feet. To the common worshipper, these were ornaments. To those attuned to deeper currents, they looked like codes. Sacred geometry, the idea that numbers, shapes, and proportions mirror the divine order of the cosmos, was not new. It came from Pythagoras in Greece, from Egypt's pyramids, from Babylon's star watchers. But in medieval Europe, it had all but vanished from the mainstream. Suddenly, in the 12th and 13th centuries, it returned, alive in stone, carved into the very bones of cathedrals. Did the Templars carry it back with them from Jerusalem? Or had they unearthed scrolls that reawakened forgotten wisdom? Consider Chartres Cathedral. Beneath its soaring vaults lies a labyrinth cut into the floor, a circular path winding inward and outward like the coil of creation itself. Pilgrims would walk this path in place of a journey to the Holy Land, each step a meditation. But look closer, and the labyrinth reveals ratios and alignments connected to the cycles of the heavens. It is both map and ritual, a journey of the body and a diagram of the universe. Who designed it, and why in that precise form? In Reims and Amiens, the facades are covered in figures and shapes that speak two languages at once. The biblical stories understood by all, and the mathematical patterns visible only to those who looked with a different eye. A rose window, a wheel of light, becomes more than decoration. It becomes a mandala, a cosmic diagram echoing the movements of stars. Some scholars dismiss this as coincidence, but when the same patterns repeat across so many cathedrals, funded and influenced by the same circles of patrons, the question becomes harder to ignore. The Templars themselves built chapels that contained similar secrets. Their round churches, modeled after the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, were not square like most Christian churches, but circular, echoing both the Temple of Solomon and the geometry of eternity. Within these spaces, light and shadow danced in deliberate patterns at certain times of year, hinting at astronomical alignments. Did the Templars design these as memorials of what they found beneath the Temple Mount? Or were they initiatory spaces, where symbols in stone taught lessons that could never be spoken aloud? Legends say that hidden among the carvings of these cathedrals are faces and figures that do not belong to the Christian story. Strange plants, exotic animals, even depictions of the zodiac. Some believe these images represent knowledge carried from the East, fragments of Kabbalah, of Sufi mysticism, of ancient star lore absorbed during the Crusades. To most worshippers, they were harmless decoration. To those who knew, they were signposts pointing toward a deeper current running beneath the surface of faith. What is most striking is the shift these buildings represented. Before the Gothic style, European churches were heavy, fortress-like, built to withstand siege. The Gothic cathedrals, by contrast, seemed to float, their weight dissolved into pointed arches and ribbed vaults. It was as if the builders had unlocked a new science of balance, a knowledge of how stone could become light. Where had they learned it? Standard history says it was simple architectural evolution. But in the mysterious silence surrounding the Templars, others see the hand of hidden knowledge. There is a tale, never proven but often repeated, that the masons of the cathedrals were themselves linked to the Templars, forming a network of builders who guarded secrets passed down from Jerusalem. This idea would later evolve into the stories of Freemasonry, with its symbols of compass and square, its rituals of geometry and light. If the Templars indeed preserved ancient teachings, then perhaps they seeded them into the hands of masons, who carved the truths into stone for all to see and none to fully understand. The cathedrals stand today as open books of mystery, their pages written in stone and glass, their meanings layered. To the faithful, they are monuments of devotion. To the curious, they are puzzles. To the conspiratorial, they are vaults of code. And through it all, the Templars' presence lingers, not as names on plaques, but as shadows in the patterns, as echoes in the geometry, as whispers in the play of light. What remains unsettling is the sense of intent. None of this appears random. The precision of proportion, the recurrence of sacred ratios like the golden mean, the deliberate alignment with solstices or equinoxes, these are not accidents. They suggest knowledge, preserved across centuries, whispered into the ears of architects and masons. If the Templars carried such knowledge from the East, they may not have hoarded it as treasure but expressed it as architecture, immortalizing it in forms that outlast even the fall of kingdoms. So the question shifts. Were the cathedrals only places of worship, or were they also temples of knowledge, veiled in Christian imagery, but holding secrets older than Christianity itself? And if so, what message were the Templars leaving for those who could read the language of stone? The answer, if there is one, is not written in texts. It is carved into walls, set into stained glass, traced in labyrinths underfoot. And perhaps that is why it endures. A book can be burned, a scroll lost, but a cathedral stands for centuries, speaking silently to those who listen. The Templars are gone, their order broken, their secrets scattered. Yet the buildings remain, testaments to a knowledge that refuses to vanish. When we walk through their arches and look upward into the impossible vaults of stone, we are touching the same mystery that once moved through the order's hidden life. But if the cathedrals are coded with secrets, the next step is to ask, what other knowledge did the Templars guard beyond geometry and stone? Did their journey into Jerusalem connect them to currents of mysticism older and deeper than Europe had ever known? If the Knights Templar carried anything back from Jerusalem besides wealth and relics, it may have been ideas. The Holy Land was not only a battlefield, but a meeting place of traditions. Here, in the crowded markets and quiet monasteries, Christians, Jews, and Muslims lived closer than they ever had in Europe. Scholars traded thoughts as easily as merchants traded spices. For the Templars, who walked between worlds as both warriors and monks, the air was thick with currents of knowledge, some ancient, some forbidden, some whispered in the margins of faith. One such current was Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition that sought to explain creation not through story, but through symbol. In Kabbalah, letters were more than writing. They were building blocks of reality, numbers that shaped existence itself. The tree of life, with its spheres and paths, mapped the universe as both cosmic and personal, the journey of the soul intertwined with the structure of the heavens. To a knight trained to see battle lines and fortresses, this vision of creation as geometry of spirit may have resonated with startling force. And though Kabbalah was guarded closely, it is not unthinkable that fragments reached the ears of curious Templars in Jerusalem, men already rumored to dig beneath temples and probe into mysteries. Another current was Gnosticism, a tradition older still, born in the first centuries of Christianity but condemned as heresy. The Gnostics believed salvation came not through obedience, but through knowledge, gnosis, direct insight into the divine spark hidden within. For them, the world was a shadow, a flawed reflection, and the true God could only be known by piercing the veil of illusion. Officially, the Church sought to erase such teachings, yet echoes survived, carried through manuscripts, whispered in secret groups, hinted at in symbols that drifted across borders. In the charged silence of the East, could the Templars have encountered remnants of this forbidden vision? And then there was the wisdom of Islamic mystics, the Sufis. While Crusaders often painted their Muslim enemies as faceless foes, the truth was more complex. There were truces, exchanges, even moments of respect between warriors, and beneath the politics, Sufism offered teachings of unity with God through love, rhythm, and inward journey. The whirling of dervishes, the poetry of Rumi, the idea that the heart itself could be the temple, all of this pulsed in the same land where the Templars held their quarters. Whether through open dialogue or secret curiosity, it is hard to imagine that the knights who lingered in Jerusalem for decades did not brush against such ideas. If we stitch these threads together, Kabbalah's cosmic maps, Gnosticism's hunger for hidden truth, Sufism's union through love, we find a tapestry of knowledge that could easily slip into the shadows of Templar myth. It would explain the strange symbols, the geometry etched into stone, the whispered accusations that they carried teachings beyond the Church. It would explain why, to their enemies, they seemed both holy and heretical at once. Some traditions even suggest that the Templars became more than students. They became bridges. By guarding pilgrims, by negotiating with local rulers, they occupied a liminal space between cultures. And in that space, knowledge crossed. Perhaps a Jewish scholar traded insight for protection. Perhaps a Sufi mystic shared words with a knight curious enough to listen. Perhaps texts taken from beneath the Temple Mount carried echoes of older wisdom that resonated with all three traditions. The official Church, of course, would have bristled at such mingling. Knowledge outside its control was always a threat. Yet secrecy was already the Templars' way. They swore oaths behind closed doors. They initiated novices with rituals no outsider witnessed. To the faithful, these were signs of discipline. To skeptics, they were signs of hidden teachings. If indeed they absorbed fragments of Kabbalah, Gnostic vision, or Sufi wisdom, the Templars would have folded it into their silence, carried it like a hidden current beneath the armor of faith. Centuries later, when Freemasonry rose in Europe, its symbols bore uncanny resemblance to this hidden stream. The compass and square, the emphasis on sacred architecture, the idea of initiation through stages of knowledge, all echo traditions older than themselves. Many have wondered whether the Masons inherited directly from the Templars, or whether both drew from the same underground river of mystical thought. Either way, the resonance is strong enough to make the connection impossible to ignore. But how did this knowledge manifest in the Order's life? Not openly. The Templars were practical men. Builders, bankers, warriors. Their daily existence was discipline, combat, management of estates. Yet beneath this practicality, perhaps they carried a different vision of the world, a vision where numbers shaped creation, where knowledge opened salvation, where the divine could be touched not only in sacraments but in silence and geometry. If so, it was never written plainly, never confessed in trial, never left for historians to prove. It survived in hints, in accusations, in the enduring unease the Templars inspired. It is telling that when the Order was finally crushed, the charges against them included heresy, idol worship, and secret rites. Most of these were likely fabrications, tools of politics, but some may have been distorted echoes of a truth, that the Templars had indeed stepped beyond the boundaries of the Church, not into corruption, but into contact with currents of knowledge too old and too strange to be tolerated. The idea unsettles us because it suggests the Templars were not merely warriors of Christendom, but custodians of a different kind of treasure, wisdom older than any one religion, passed like a torch through hidden hands, whispered in symbols carved into stone. If so, then their story is not only about battles and riches, but about the survival of knowledge across centuries of silence. And if the Templars carried this knowledge into Europe, planting it in cathedrals, in rituals, in secret societies, then the question opens wider. What exactly did they preserve, and how much of it still lives, hidden in plain sight? If there was one power the Templars wielded that rivaled even their swords, it was their command of money. In an age when wealth was measured in land, grain, and coin, they learned to move value invisibly across kingdoms, seas, and battlefields. To their contemporaries, it seemed almost like sorcery. Warrior monks, sworn to poverty, who nonetheless controlled a river of gold that flowed across Europe and the Holy Land. It began simply with donations. Nobles eager to earn salvation gave fields and estates to the Order. Merchants paid for protection along dangerous roads. Kings rewarded them with castles and privileges. But soon the Templars discovered something no other order had mastered: how to turn this patchwork of gifts into a network. They managed their estates with the precision of seasoned administrators. Grain from England fed soldiers in Acre. Wool from Flanders became cloth in the markets of the Levant. Their commanderies stretched like a web, each node sending resources to another, each thread reinforcing the whole. From this web grew something stranger. Pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem could deposit money with the Templars in Paris and withdraw it in the Holy Land, carrying only a letter of credit rather than a heavy purse of coins. In a world where robbery was common and borders treacherous, this system was nothing short of revolutionary. To modern eyes, it was the birth of international banking. To medieval eyes, it was uncanny, as if the Templars had discovered a way to make wealth appear and vanish at will. Rumors clung to this practice. How could poor knights, bound by vows of poverty, hold greater wealth than kings? How could they lend money, charge fees, and yet remain sanctified by the Church, which condemned usury as sin? Some whispered that their banking system was not of their own invention, but learned, or taken, from hidden sources in Jerusalem. Perhaps scrolls they found beneath the temple described ancient systems of trade. Perhaps knowledge passed to them from Jewish or Muslim scholars whose traditions of finance stretched far deeper than Europe's. Whatever the origin, the effect was undeniable. The Templars became the trusted vault of Christendom. Their wealth was not simply coin. They owned entire regions, vast farms, thriving ports, and fleets of ships that crossed the Mediterranean. They loaned to kings, sometimes becoming creditors powerful enough to dictate terms. Kings feared them as much as they needed them. The French crown, forever drowning in debt, leaned heavily on Templar coffers. English monarchs entrusted their treasuries to Templar halls in London. Even the papacy relied on their vaults and networks. For a time, the order stood at the center of an invisible empire, one made not of territory but of trust, obligation, and gold. But with wealth came secrecy. The Templars did not disclose their ledgers to outsiders. Their methods of transfer, their codes, their vaults, all hidden behind walls of silence. To ordinary people, it looked like mystery bordering on magic. Stories grew of hidden chambers filled with treasure, of underground vaults where the order hoarded gold taken from the Temple of Solomon. Some imagined caverns beneath Paris or London filled with glittering relics. Others said their wealth was not material at all, but knowledge, formulas, maps, symbols that could be turned into power whenever needed. The secrecy only fueled suspicion. If their system of credit was so effective, why did no one else master it? If their wealth was so vast, why did they never flaunt it openly? And if their vows of poverty were sincere, what were they doing with all that gold? The contradictions created fertile soil for rumor. Some believed the Templars worshipped an idol hidden in their vaults, a head that spoke prophecies. Others thought they sacrificed coins to forbidden spirits. A few believed they had discovered the secret of alchemy, turning base metals into gold, and that their banking was merely a mask for something stranger. The truth, as always, may be more practical, but no less remarkable. The Templars built a financial system centuries ahead of its time. Their discipline and secrecy made it secure, their religious status made it trusted, and their military reach made it protected. Yet in a world of faith and fear, practicality often looks like magic. And so, whether they meant to or not, the Templars wrapped themselves in an aura of mystery that made them untouchable, until envy caught up with them. It is perhaps no accident that their fall began with money. King Philip IV of France, drowning in debt to the order, saw an opportunity to erase his obligations by destroying his creditors. The accusations that followed, heresy, idolatry, secret rites, were as much about fear of their secrecy as about genuine belief. To the king, the Templars' hidden wealth and knowledge were intolerable. To the Church, their independence was dangerous. To the people, the rumors of secret treasure were irresistible. And so, in 1307, their vaults were seized, their members imprisoned, their leaders tortured. But the strangest part of all was this: the treasure itself was never found. When royal soldiers stormed Templar properties, they expected to uncover hoards of gold. Instead, they found little. Ledgers vanished, ships disappeared, vaults were empty. It was as if the order had seen their fate coming and moved their wealth beyond the reach of kings. Some said it sailed away from La Rochelle on Templar ships, never to be seen again. Others whispered it was buried, scattered across hidden commanderies, or spirited into the keeping of allies who later became the Freemasons. Whatever the truth, the disappearance only deepened the legend. Even now, seekers chase the shadow of Templar gold. In the forests of Portugal, in the caves of Scotland, in the ruins of France, stories persist of hidden chests waiting to be found. Yet the greatest mystery may not be the gold itself, but the knowledge of how it moved unseen, how a group of warrior monks built a system so advanced it still resonates in the way we understand money today. The silence of the missing treasure leaves us with the same unsettling question. Was the Templars' wealth ever truly material? Or was it always something else? An invisible power, born of knowledge, secrecy, and trust, which no king could ever fully destroy. By the dawn of the 14th century, the Templars stood like a fortress in the middle of Europe, wealthy, disciplined, and untouchable. They answered to no king, paid no tax, and bowed only to the Pope. Their estates stretched across the continent, their ships moved unseen across seas, and their vaults held the debts of monarchs. To ordinary people, they were the holy knights of Christ. To rulers, they were creditors with too much power, and to one king in particular, they were an obstacle that could not be tolerated. Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, was a monarch of cold calculation. His wars had drained his treasury, and his appetite for power outstripped his means. By 1307, he owed the Templars more money than he could ever repay. To erase that debt, he devised a plan not of repayment, but of destruction. If the Templars could be accused of heresy, their wealth could be seized, their order dissolved, and their influence shattered. It was a gamble as dangerous as it was ruthless. The Church should have been their shield, for the Templars were sworn directly to the Pope. But the papacy itself was weakened. Clement V, the Pope of the time, was a man caught in the shadow of Philip. Moved to Avignon and entangled in French politics, Clement found himself too compromised to stand firmly against the crown. And so, with papal hesitation and royal determination, the trap was set. On the morning of Friday, October 13th, 1307, royal soldiers moved with chilling precision. Across France, Templar commanderies were surrounded, their doors smashed open, their brothers dragged from their beds. They were accused of heresy, blasphemy, idolatry, and secret sins whispered in the dark. The suddenness of the attack stunned the order. Within hours, hundreds of knights were in chains. Friday the 13th, remembered today as a day of bad luck, was born in this moment of betrayal. The charges were sensational. The Templars, it was claimed, spat on the cross during their initiation. They denied Christ, worshipped a mysterious idol called Baphomet, and practiced obscene rituals in secret. They were accused of kissing each other on the mouth, the navel, even the base of the spine as part of their rites. Accusations meant to scandalize, to paint them as perverse and corrupt. And above all, They were accused of hoarding treasure and knowledge that belonged not to Christ, but to darker powers. Torture drew confessions. Men stretched on racks, burned with irons, or locked in dungeons admitted to whatever their captors demanded. Yes, they spat on the cross, some said, though only as a test of obedience. Yes, they kissed in strange places, though it was only symbolic. Yes, they had seen a head, sometimes described as a skull, sometimes as a bearded face that spoke prophecies. Under pain, truth and falsehood blurred, the crown collected what it needed, a picture of an order rotten with heresy. Yet even as these confessions spread, doubts lingered. Outside of France, rulers were slower to act. In England, in Aragon, in Germany, investigations revealed little. Many knights denied the charges, holding firm despite torture. And in the silence of what could not be proven, questions grew. Were the accusations entirely fabricated, or were they twisted echoes of something the Templars truly guarded? Did the idol called Baphomet exist as a demon of invention? Or was it a distorted memory of a relic carried from Jerusalem? Perhaps a severed head of a saint? Perhaps a fragment of Eastern wisdom personified into myth? The Pope, pressed by Philip, reluctantly moved against the order. In 1312, under the weight of royal pressure, Clement XI dissolved the Templars officially. Their properties were meant to pass to the Hospitallers, another knightly order, but much vanished along the way. Absorbed by the crown, hidden by allies, or simply disappearing into silence. The end came slowly, but its symbol was clear. In 1314, Jacques de Molay, the last grandmaster, was burned alive in Paris. As the flames consumed him, chroniclers say he cried out, summoning Pope Clement and King Philip to meet him before God's judgment within a year. And so the legend of the Templar curse was born. Within months, Clement was dead of illness. Within the year, Philip fell as well. To those who believed, it was proof that the Templars had carried with them not only treasure and secrets, but also the power to reach beyond death. But what truly destroyed them? Was it only greed and debt? A king's desperate attempt to seize gold he could not repay? Or was it fear that the Templars had grown too strong, that their knowledge reached too far, that their secrets threatened to unmask truths the church and crown could not allow? No treasure was ever found in Philip's raids. No idol was produced in court. No scrolls or relics were unveiled to justify the charges. The silence of the missing objects speaks louder than the accusations themselves. Either the Templars possessed nothing, and the entire trial was a fabrication, or they had moved their secrets beyond reach, leaving their enemies with only shadows and stories. And so, the conspiracy lingers. Did the Vatican collude willingly, fearing what the Templars might reveal? Did Philip suppress not only a rival, but a truth that could shake Christendom? Or did the order, foreseeing its fate, scatter into the night, carrying with them the treasure, the relics, or the knowledge that had defined their power for 2 centuries? The fall of the Templars was meant to be the end, but in many ways, it was only the beginning. For once the order was gone, its secrets did not vanish. They only grew louder, whispered through legend, myth, and the uneasy silence of unanswered questions. And if the Vatican and the French crown truly conspired to erase the Templars, then what was it they feared so much? The night was cold in Paris when Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, was led to his death. It was March 1314, and the Seine reflected the glow of torches as crowds gathered to watch the end of an order that had once commanded kings. Bound to a stake, the old knight stood unshaken, his white mantle marked with the red cross now soiled with chains and ash. When the fire was lit and the smoke rose around him, witnesses claimed his voice carried above the crackle of flames. He called upon God to judge his persecutors. He summoned Pope Clement V and King Philip IV of France to stand before the divine throne within a year. To some, it was the cry of a man betrayed, a final defiance hurled at the powers that had destroyed his order. To others, it was a curse, a binding spell that no crown or mitre could escape. And as history tells it, the curse did not delay. Within a month, Clement was dead of illness. By the end of that same year, Philip fell suddenly, struck down while hunting. To a medieval mind, this was no coincidence. It was proof that the Templars had carried with them a power stronger than swords and gold, a power that could reach from the pyre into the bloodlines of kings. The legend spread quickly. Chroniclers embroidered it with detail, turning Mole's last words into prophecy. Some said he called down not only the Pope and the king, but the entire Capetian dynasty. And indeed, within a generation, Philip's heirs were entangled in scandal, betrayal, and sudden death, their once mighty line collapsing into crisis. The curse of the Templars, people whispered, had unseated the very house that had destroyed them. Was it superstition? Or was it the echo of something deeper? Curses, after all, are not only spells but symbols. They mark the wound of betrayal, the weight of injustice, the memory that refuses to fade. Whether or not Jacques de Molay summoned divine wrath, his words branded the fall of the Templars with an aura of vengeance. From then on, their destruction was never seen as simple politics or debt. It was seen as a crime that demanded cosmic retribution. And yet, the curse may have been more than words. Some believe the Templars, steeped in hidden knowledge, carried traditions of ritual that could focus intention into power. To speak a curse at the moment of death was to unleash the full force of a soul unbroken by fire. In ancient traditions, the dying breath was sacred, the threshold between worlds. If the Templars had absorbed fragments of such belief, through Kabbalah, Gnostic rites, or Eastern mysticism, then de Molay's curse was not only defiance, it was a weapon. The ripples of the curse did not end with Philip's dynasty. Across Europe, rulers who had joined in the suppression of the Templars suffered sudden misfortunes. Wars turned against them. Heirs died unexpectedly. Fortunes collapsed. Whether coincidence or not, the legend of the Templar curse grew until it seemed to hang like a shadow over thrones and altars alike. But curses, like treasures, invite questions. Was the curse a supernatural judgment, or was it history's way of balancing accounts? Philip and Clement, by destroying the Templars, also disrupted the financial and political networks that had stabilized parts of Europe. Their deaths, their heirs' failures, may have been the natural consequence of a gamble too risky, a betrayal too deep. Yet in the medieval mind, complexity was often distilled into symbol, and the symbol that endured was simple. The Templars had been wronged, and the heavens themselves had answered. This legend of vengeance only deepened the mystique of the order. Instead of vanishing into silence, the Templars became martyrs of secrecy, their fall wrapped in the aura of prophecy fulfilled. People whispered that not all had perished. Some had escaped France before the arrests, carrying with them treasure, relics, and knowledge. The curse, then, was not only vengeance but warning. Those who betrayed the order would face ruin, for the Templars still walked in shadow. Later centuries embroidered the story further. Some claimed de Molay's curse reached down the centuries to strike at monarchs much later, whispering that even the French Revolution, centuries after Philip, was part of the Templars' revenge. Such tales may stretch belief, but they reveal how powerfully the legend of the curse rooted itself in the imagination of Europe. Once the Templars were gone, their absence invited explanation, and the curse was one of the most compelling. It raises a larger question. Why did the destruction of the Templars leave behind not clarity, but mystery? Perhaps because no treasure was found, no idols produced, no conclusive proof offered. The silence created a vacuum, and into that vacuum flowed curses, conspiracies, and legends. If the Templars had been nothing more than wealthy knights, their end might have been remembered as a political maneuver. But because they had lived in secrecy, because their rituals were closed, because their rise was inexplicable, their fall could never be ordinary. It had to be wrapped in the language of destiny and doom. Jacques de Molay stood in the flames, and his words, whether curse or cry, became the voice of an order erased from the map, but not from memory. In that moment, the Templars ceased to be only an institution. They became a myth, reborn in fire, their silence echoing louder than their banners ever had. And so, centuries later, we still ask, was the curse of de Molay mere coincidence? Or was it the final act of a secret tradition, a ritual unleashed at the edge of death? And if the Templars truly carried knowledge older than kings, then what did they pass into the silence when their last grandmaster burned? The pyres in Paris were meant to mark the end of the Knights Templar. Yet, endings in history are rarely so clean. When the order was dissolved in 1312 and its leaders executed in the years that followed, one question refused to die. What became of the rest? Thousands of knights, sergeants, and servants belonged to the order, scattered across Europe and the Mediterranean. Some were arrested, some absorbed into other orders, some vanished from record entirely. And it is within this silence that new legends were born, legends of escape, exile, and survival. In France, the king's soldiers struck swiftly, but elsewhere the grip was weaker. In England, arrests came slowly and without zeal. In Aragon, Portugal, and Germany, trials yielded little, and many knights were quietly released. Some slipped into local communities, others folded into different orders, but whispers claimed that a core of Templars remained intact, their vows unbroken, their secrets preserved. Portugal became one of the most intriguing refuges. King Denis, unwilling to destroy men who had defended his lands, simply reshaped the order under a new name. In 1319, the Order of Christ was founded, inheriting Templar lands, castles, and many of its members. Officially, it was a different brotherhood, loyal to Rome. Unofficially, it was the Templars reborn in disguise. Centuries later, when Portuguese caravels sailed into the Atlantic, the red cross painted on their sails was the same that once marked the mantles of Templar knights. To some, this was no coincidence. It was a continuation, the order transforming from crusaders of Jerusalem into navigators of the sea. Scotland, too, harbors its share of legend. At the time of the arrests, Scotland was in open defiance of the Pope, its king excommunicated. Papal bulls against the Templars carried little weight there. Stories tell of knights who fled France by sea, landing on Scottish shores and offering their swords to Robert the Bruce. At Bannockburn in 1314, when Scottish forces triumphed against overwhelming English numbers, some chroniclers whispered of a mysterious cavalry charge that turned the tide. A charge, they said, led by exiled Templars. Whether fact or invention, the tale stitched the order into the fabric of Scottish independence. From there, the legend spread further still. Some claimed the Templars sailed west, beyond the edge of known maps, carrying their treasure into hidden lands. In this telling, they were the first Europeans to reach the shores of America, long before Columbus. Supporters point to strange carvings in Nova Scotia, to the mystery of Oak Island, where tunnels and symbols hint at a buried hoard. Each clue, though uncertain, feeds the story. That the Templars became not victims of history, but architects of a secret diaspora, scattering across oceans to preserve their legacy. Closer to home, their supposed survival intertwined with the rise of new brotherhoods. The Freemasons, centuries later, bore symbols and rituals uncannily similar to Templar lore. The compass and square, the oaths of secrecy, the idea of initiation through levels of knowledge, all seemed to echo the order that had vanished in flames. Some saw in Freemasonry the rebirth of the Templars, a line unbroken from Jerusalem to Enlightenment Europe. Whether true or not, the idea gave the Templars a second life, woven into the mythos of secret societies. But why do these tales of survival cling so stubbornly? Perhaps because the official story leaves too much unanswered. The Templars were too disciplined, too widespread, too wealthy for their order to simply collapse overnight. Ships disappeared from the port of La Rochelle at the moment of the arrests. Treasure vanished. Archives were lost. These gaps demand explanation, and legend fills them with stories of flight, refuge, and hidden continuity. In truth, fragments of the order did survive, though not always in the dramatic fashion the legends describe. In Spain, some joined the Hospitallers. In Portugal, they became the Order of Christ. In other lands, they faded into local life, knights without banners but still bound by memory. Yet the myths of escape, to Scotland, to Portugal, across the ocean, carry a power that history alone cannot erase. They transform the Templars from martyrs into wanderers, their mission unfinished, their secrets carried onward like a torch in exile. The strongest of these myths, of course, are tied to treasure. If the Templars truly spirited away their wealth before the arrests, then it had to go somewhere. Some imagine it hidden in the hills of Scotland, others buried in the soil of France, others still carried westward to new worlds. Each version invites seekers to look for gold, relics, or scrolls, but perhaps the real treasure was not metal at all. Perhaps it was the survival of ideas, knowledge preserved in disguise, passed through orders like the Freemasons, or carried quietly in families loyal to the Red Cross. What lingers is the sense that the Templars did not end with the fire in Paris. Their shadow stretches into the age of discovery, into the architecture of cathedrals, into the rituals of secret societies, into the legends of hidden treasure. Like a river disappearing underground, they may have gone unseen. But the current did not stop. It surfaced again in unexpected places, reshaped but alive. And so, we return to the question that refuses to rest. Did the Templars truly perish, Or did they survive in silence, scattered yet bound by secret vows? Did their ships carry treasure across the seas? Or was the treasure the very knowledge they had sworn to guard? Centuries after the flames consumed Jacques de Molay, another brotherhood began to rise across Europe, cloaked in secrecy and symbols of stone. They called themselves Freemasons, men bound by oaths, rituals, and the language of architecture. Their lodges appeared quietly, their members drawn from builders, nobles, and thinkers alike. And almost from the beginning, whispers followed them, that behind their compasses and squares, behind their strange ceremonies, lay the ghost of the Templars. The connection is not easy to prove. Historians remind us that Freemasonry, as we know it, only took shape in the 17th century, yet the echoes are too strong to ignore. Both orders claimed secrecy as their shield. Both used initiation rituals that moved a man step by step into hidden knowledge. Both spoke in symbols, crosses, stars, geometric patterns, that seemed to conceal as much as they revealed. And both carried the aura of a brotherhood that existed not only in the open, but in the unseen currents of history. The Masonic lodges themselves seemed to carry a memory of Templar architecture. Their symbols of compass and square echoed the geometry carved into Gothic cathedrals, the same cathedrals that Templar influence had helped to build. Their emphasis on light, on balance, on the building of a spiritual temple mirrored the ideas of sacred geometry whispered through the Middle Ages. Was this continuity coincidence? Or was it the survival of a tradition carried quietly from the ashes of the Templars into the lodges of a later age? Legends claim that when the Templars were scattered, some fled into Scotland. There, beyond the reach of papal decrees, they found shelter among the stone masons who built castles and cathedrals. Out of this unlikely alliance, it is said, Freemasonry was born, a blending of operative masons who built with stone and speculative heirs of the Templars who built with symbols and secrets. Rosslyn Chapel, built in the 15th century, is often pointed to as a bridge between the two. Its carvings overflow with symbols, stars, vines, strange figures, that some interpret as Masonic, others as Templar, and still others as something older, a mosaic of forgotten knowledge expressed in stone. Within Freemasonry, the Templar legend became more than rumor. By the 18th century, certain branches of Masonry openly styled themselves as inheritors of the Templar legacy. Degrees of initiation were named for knights, rituals evoked Jerusalem, and the Red Cross reappeared as a symbol of hidden chivalry. Whether these were genuine continuities or imaginative reinventions, they kept the Templar flame alive, burning in ceremonies long after the order's supposed destruction. But what if it was more than invention? If the Templars had indeed survived in exile, scattering into hidden cells, they would have needed a mask, a way to continue their brotherhood without attracting the wrath of kings or popes. Masonic lodges, already secretive and respected, offered the perfect vessel. To hide their lineage within the language of builders was to shield their heritage behind the neutrality of craft. Stone and symbol became their camouflage. The overlap between the two traditions extends into philosophy. Freemasonry teaches that the true temple is not built of stone, but of the human soul. The initiate builds himself as a sacred structure, polished by knowledge, aligned by virtue. This idea mirrors whispers about the Templars' hidden teachings. that their true treasure was not gold, but understanding, that they carried fragments of mystical knowledge from Jerusalem and wove them into a brotherhood of transformation. Both orders suggest that beneath the outer armor of ritual lies an inner path, a journey toward light hidden within darkness. Accusations of heresy also echo between them. Just as the Templars were accused of worshipping idols and practicing forbidden rites, so too were Freemasons accused of conspiring in secret, plotting against kings, or guarding truths that threatened the Church. In both cases, the secrecy itself became the crime, the unknown more dangerous than any proven deed. And in both cases, the accusations only deepened the mystery, making the orders appear more powerful in rumor than in fact. What survives most strongly, perhaps, is the feeling of continuity. The Templars vanished in fire, but their symbols reappeared in stone. Their vows of secrecy resurfaced in lodges. Their legend of hidden knowledge lived on in the speculative rituals of Masons. Whether by direct inheritance or by myth reborn, the Templars were never truly gone. They had become a shadow tradition, woven into the fabric of Europe under another name. Yet this raises a deeper question. If the Templars did indeed pass their secrets into Freemasonry, what was the nature of that secret? Was it simply the structure of brotherhood and ritual? Was it financial wisdom, veiled in symbols? Or was it something stranger still, fragments of mystical knowledge unearthed beneath the Temple Mount, encoded into architecture and initiation so it could survive across centuries without ever being spoken aloud? The lodges never answer directly. Their symbols invite interpretation. Their rituals hint without explaining. Their silence preserves the ambiguity. Perhaps that is the greatest inheritance of the Templars, the ability to transform absence into power, secrecy into influence, silence into legend. And so the Templar story bends once again, no longer confined to Crusader knights of the 12th century, but resurfacing in the secret halls of 18th century Europe. In fire they died, in stone they survived, and in secrecy they lived again. But if the Templars truly lived on in the lodges of Freemasonry, then one question becomes sharper. What other documents, relics, or teachings may have been carried forward with them, hidden not in vaults, but in the rituals of a secret brotherhood? If the Templars carried anything into exile, it may not have been chests of gold or relics of stone, but words. Manuscripts, maps, and secret texts, fragile yet enduring, have long been rumored to form the heart of their hidden treasure. For paper and parchment, though vulnerable to time, have the power to outlive empires. And in whispers across centuries, fragments of such writings are said to have surfaced, hinting at knowledge that was never meant for open eyes. Some of the earliest stories spoke of scrolls discovered beneath the Temple Mount. These were said to contain genealogies of kings, rituals of the ancient priests, or even instructions for building Solomon's temple itself, drawn in sacred proportions. Others imagined stranger texts, writings of prophets who spoke in riddles, or records from before the flood, guarded in the earth until the right hands could read them. None of these documents have ever been proven to exist. Yet the idea that the Templars carried away written knowledge explains much. Why their rise was sudden, why their secrecy was fierce, and why their memory continues to haunt the margins of history. Later centuries produced stranger claims. In the 16th century, a mysterious manuscript called the Book of Soiga surfaced, filled with angelic names and mathematical grids. It fascinated the scholar John Dee, who believed it to hold ancient wisdom of creation. Though not directly linked to the Templars, some have wondered whether such texts were fragments of the same current of knowledge that once moved through their order. After all, the grids and ciphers echoed the geometry found in Templar churches, the sense that numbers themselves were keys to hidden doors. Even more tantalizing are the maps. Some say the Templars possessed charts that pointed beyond the known world. In Portugal, where the Order of Christ succeeded the Templars, explorers of the 15th century sailed with uncanny confidence into the Atlantic. Prince Henry the Navigator, who guided Portugal's age of discovery, was Grand Master of the Order of Christ. On their sails flew the red cross once worn on Templar mantles. Did they inherit not only lands but also charts, maps carried from Jerusalem, drawn from sources long forgotten, showing coasts before Europe believed they existed? The mystery of Oak Island in Nova Scotia adds fuel to this tale. Since the 18th century, explorers have dug into its strange shafts and tunnels, finding layers of oak beams, stone markers, and hints of treasure. No definitive hoard has been uncovered, but symbols resembling crosses and cryptic carvings point toward something hidden. Some believe the Templars fled across the Atlantic, carrying both their treasure and their manuscripts to bury in safety, leaving puzzles as guardians. Skeptics dismiss this as fantasy, but the persistence of the legend reveals how strongly we sense that words and maps may have been their true inheritance. Among the strangest rumors are those of coded manuscripts. In France, tales circulate of parchments hidden in Rennes-le-Château, discovered centuries later by a country priest who suddenly became wealthy and secretive. The parchments, it is said, contained genealogies that threatened to upend the story of Christ himself. Whether forged or real, these stories link once more to the Templar myth, that beneath their vows they guarded truths too dangerous for the Church to allow. It is worth remembering that manuscripts were power in the Middle Ages. Few could read, fewer still could write, and those who possessed texts controlled the flow of knowledge. If the Templars carried ancient writings, even without fully understanding them, they would have held a treasure greater than gold. A scroll describing lost technologies, forgotten sciences, or alternative theologies could reshape the world in silence. It would explain their sudden grasp of finance, their cryptic symbols, and the unease they inspired in kings and popes. And perhaps that is why, when they were arrested, no great treasure was found. Gold can be seized, relics displayed, but manuscripts can vanish into a cloak, a ship's chest, a hidden vault. They can be copied, disguised, smuggled across borders. Knowledge leaves no glittering pile to be captured by greedy hands. It leaves only shadows, whispers, and the sense that something has slipped away. This brings us to a haunting possibility, that the Templars' greatest treasure survives not in one hidden vault, but in fragments scattered across Europe and beyond. A cipher in a dusty manuscript here, a map folded into a library there, a carving in stone whose meaning has been forgotten. Each piece isolated means little, but together they may form a puzzle, the remnants of a body of knowledge the Templars once held whole. Some researchers have claimed to trace such threads. They point to odd manuscripts in the Vatican Library, locked away from public eyes. They mention the Codex Bezae, an ancient manuscript of the Gospels with peculiar readings that differ from the official text. They cite letters from monks who hinted at knowledge hidden in secret archives. None of this proves a Templar connection. Yet the possibility remains, like a door half open in the dark, that scattered across the world lie the remains of a secret library that once sat beneath the Temple of Solomon. And so the question lingers. If the Templars did carry manuscripts of ancient knowledge, where are they now? In the vaults of secret societies? In coded rituals disguised as allegory? Or still buried, waiting beneath layers of earth for hands daring enough to uncover them? The silence of history offers no answer. But the legends insist that something was written, something preserved, something carried across centuries in ink and parchment rather than in gold. If the Templars' true treasure was knowledge, then the manuscripts are its most enduring symbol. And if fragments of those manuscripts still survive, then perhaps the order has never truly vanished. It has simply changed form, hidden not in castles but in words, waiting for those who know how to read. Legends often thrive in silence, in the gaps where history leaves no record. But science does not thrive in silence. Archaeology, with its slow brushes and careful measurements, seeks to replace whispers with stones, speculation with evidence. And yet, when it comes to the Knights Templar and the Temple Mount, even science finds itself walking in shadows. The Temple Mount remains one of the most contested and sacred places on earth. For Jews, it is the site of Solomon's Temple, where the Ark of the Covenant once rested. For Muslims, it is the Haram al-Sharif, crowned by the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, where the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have ascended to heaven. For Christians, it is the ground trodden by Christ himself, the heart of Jerusalem's sacred landscape. Because of its layered holiness, excavation here has always been fraught with politics, faith, and fear. The earth may hold answers, but few are allowed to disturb it. What little archaeology has been done paints a picture both rich and incomplete. Beneath the vast platform of the mount lie cisterns, tunnels, and chambers, some natural, some carved by human hands. In the 19th century, British officer Charles Warren mapped portions of these hidden spaces. He described shafts plunging into bedrock, chambers filled with rubble, and passages leading to nowhere. His notes, still studied today, confirm that a labyrinth exists beneath the surface. But what those spaces once held, or still hold, remains a mystery. Science tells us that the Ark of the Covenant has never been found. No relics of Solomon's Temple, no scrolls buried in secret chambers, no golden treasures have surfaced from beneath the mount. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered far from Jerusalem, offer a glimpse of ancient writings, but no direct connection to the Templars. From the standpoint of archaeology, the Templar legends are built on sand, not stone. And yet, archaeology also admits how little we know. Much of the mount has never been excavated, its secrets sealed by centuries of reverence and conflict. Every attempt to probe too deeply risks igniting political and religious firestorms. In this silence, legend has room to breathe. What science cannot uncover, imagination fills. Outside the Temple Mount, traces of the Templars themselves remain. Their castles dot the Mediterranean, from the fortress of Crac des Chevaliers in Syria to Tomar in Portugal. Archaeologists studying these sites find not treasure, but stone, chapels, dormitories, granaries, wells. Yet even here, mystery lingers. Some chapels contain carvings that seem out of place, geometric patterns, zodiac signs, even hints of esoteric symbols that echo the whispers of hidden knowledge. Were these merely artistic flourishes, or fragments of a secret tradition? Science cannot decide. Historians approach the Templars' rise with more practical explanations. Their banking system, often described as miraculous, is understood today as a natural evolution of existing practices. Letters of credit, deposits, and loans were not inventions of the Templars but refinements adapted to the needs of pilgrims and kings. Their wealth, historians argue, came not from hidden treasure, but from efficient management, disciplined networks, and trust built through military strength. To the rational mind, the Templars' rise needs no secret scrolls or relics. It was simply the result of discipline meeting opportunity. But even historians admit there are gaps. The sudden leap of the order from obscurity to papal recognition after 9 years in Jerusalem remains curious. The disappearance of their treasure at the time of their arrest raises questions. The persistence of rumors, echoed across centuries, suggests that even contemporaries felt something hidden moved beneath the surface of their power. Science strips away much of the glamour, yet it cannot strip away uncertainty. Every fact revealed seems to leave a shadow behind. The tunnels beneath the mount are mapped, but not fully explored. The cathedrals of Europe are studied, but their geometry still teases with unspoken meaning. The financial genius of the Templars is admired, but the origin of their knowledge remains obscure. And so archaeology, for all its rigor, finds itself at a threshold. It can tell us what stones remain, what ruins speak, what records say, but it cannot fully erase the silence where legend lives. The Ark may never have been there. The scrolls may never have existed. The Templars may have been nothing more than skilled warriors and administrators. Yet the absence of proof does not erase the resonance of possibility. Perhaps this is the greatest irony. Science, by seeking to close the question, leaves the door open. For as long as the Temple Mount remains unexcavated, for as long as tunnels stretch into uncharted darkness, the possibility of hidden treasure or knowledge remains. And possibility, to the human mind, is often stronger than certainty. The Templars themselves seemed to understand this. Their secrecy, their silence, their refusal to explain their rituals all created an aura of mystery that no fact could pierce. Whether they possessed hidden knowledge or not, they lived as if they did. And that posture alone was enough to birth centuries of legend. So we stand at a strange crossroads where science and legend meet. Archaeology has revealed much, but it has also revealed the limits of what we can know. The Templars, caught between fact and myth, remain suspended in the twilight where certainty falters. And it leaves us with a haunting question. When evidence runs out and silence remains, what do we choose to believe? The stones we can touch, or the shadows we cannot? The story of the Knights Templar cannot be told as though they stood apart from the cultures around them. For while they are remembered as warriors of Christendom, their long years in the Holy Land placed them at the crossroads of civilizations. And in such a place, no order could remain untouched. Jerusalem was not only the heart of faith, but also a marketplace of ideas, where Jewish mystics, Muslim scholars, and Christian monks crossed paths in shadows and silence. The Templars, bound by secrecy and stationed at the very center of this convergence, may have absorbed far more than history admits. Evidence of cultural blending surfaces in subtle ways. Templar fortresses in the east often bore traces of Islamic architecture, arches, domes, and decorative motifs that mirrored the styles of their supposed enemies. Some of their castles even employed local Muslim builders and craftsmen who left behind marks and flourishes drawn from their own traditions. In return, Templar influence carried Western military designs into the Levant, creating a hybrid architecture that was neither wholly European nor wholly Eastern, but something in between. The stones themselves whisper of dialogue. In the realm of ideas, the cross-currents are even stronger. We know that Jewish scholars in the 12th and 13th centuries developed the mystical system of Kabbalah, mapping creation through symbols and numbers. We know that Islamic thinkers like Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi preserved and expanded the works of Aristotle and Plato, ideas that would later ignite Europe's Renaissance. We know that Sufi poets spoke of union with the divine in language that bypassed ritual and struck directly at the heart. Could the Templars, living in the midst of such currents, have remained untouched? It seems unlikely. Some hints appear in the accusations leveled against them during their trials. They were charged with spitting on the cross, worshipping a mysterious head, and practicing rites outside the Church's control. Though most of these charges were likely political fabrications, some may have been distorted echoes of genuine practices, rituals or symbols borrowed, adapted, or misinterpreted. To the Church, anything outside its narrow frame of orthodoxy was heresy. To the Templars, perhaps, such borrowings were part of a deeper vision. That truth was larger than any single tradition. Legends even suggest that the Templars carried on quiet dialogues with Sufi mystics. Both groups valued discipline, secrecy, and devotion. Both spoke of journeys inward as much as battles outward, and both used symbols, the Templars with their red cross, the Sufis with their whirling dances and hidden poetry, that pointed toward realities beyond words. It is not hard to imagine a Templar knight, weary of endless battles, listening to a Sufi master speak of love as the path to God, and feeling a resonance that the battlefield could not erase. There are also whispers of links to the Cathars of southern France, a Christian sect branded heretical for teaching that the material world was corrupt and that salvation lay in purity of spirit. The Cathars were destroyed in the early 13th century, but stories suggest that Templars offered them protection, or at least sympathy. Both groups shared secrecy, both stood accused of heresy, and both left behind trails of legend stronger than fact. Perhaps the Templars, shaped by the East, recognized in the Cathars a familiar current, a Christianity that had absorbed echoes of Gnostic vision, stripped of worldly power, and focused on inner truth. The blending of cultures appears also in the myths that grew after the Templars' fall. The Grail legend, for example, draws from Celtic cauldrons of abundance, Christian relics of Christ's blood, and mystical ideas of transformation. It is a tapestry of traditions, woven together in a story that could only emerge in a time when cultures collided. And at its heart, the Templars stand as guardians of the Grail, keepers of a vessel that is less a cup than a symbol of knowledge drawn from many streams. Even their financial system may have roots in cultural borrowing. Islamic merchants had long used systems of credit and transfer, more advanced than those of medieval Europe. Jewish financiers managed networks of trade that crossed borders despite persecution. The Templars, in contact with both, may have adapted these ideas into their own web of wealth, disguising practical borrowing beneath the aura of secrecy. What appeared to Europe as miracle was, in part, the fruit of cultural exchange. The deeper mystery is what they did with this blending. Did they weave it into their rituals, their symbols, their hidden teachings? Did they see themselves not merely as warriors of Christendom, but as custodians of a larger truth, one that united rather than divided traditions? If so, they could never speak it aloud. To admit influence from Jews, Muslims, or heretical Christians would have condemned them outright. Silence was their only refuge, and secrecy their only protection. Perhaps this explains why the Templars remained so enigmatic. Their silence was not only to guard treasure or financial secrets. It may have been to guard the dangerous idea that truth is larger than borders, that knowledge flows between enemies as easily as between friends, that the divine can be glimpsed in many mirrors. Such an idea could not be spoken in the Europe of the 13th century, but it could be whispered in symbols, carved in stone, hidden in ritual, and carried forward in myth. And so the Templars became vessels of cultural memory, carrying fragments of Kabbalah, echoes of Gnosticism, whispers of Sufi love, traces of Cathar purity. Whether by intention or by accident, they absorbed the cross-currents of their time and became symbols of something greater than war. Their legend survives not only because of their power, but because they seem to embody the possibility of unity in a divided world. Yet this possibility raises a final question. If the Templars truly carried fragments of many traditions, what was the ultimate vision they preserved? Did they see themselves as knights of Christ alone, or as guardians of a truth that transcended every faith? The story of the Knights Templar begins in dust and blood, with a handful of poor knights vowing to protect pilgrims on dangerous roads. It passes through centuries of silence and shadow, through tunnels beneath the Temple Mount, through whispers of hidden scrolls and relics, through cathedrals carved in sacred geometry, through fortunes built on unseen ledgers, through curses shouted in fire. And yet, at its end, the story resists ending. For the Templars did not vanish when their banners burned. They transformed into legend, and legend does not die. Even now, their name carries weight. To historians, they are a military order caught in the machinery of politics. To conspiracy theorists, they are guardians of ancient knowledge, still alive in secret. To seekers, they are symbols of mystery, a reminder that beneath the surface of history lies an unseen current. The facts of their rise and fall are clear enough, but the gaps, the silences, the missing treasures, the unexplained symbols, invite us to step beyond fact into imagination. And it is in those spaces that the Templars live on. Perhaps their treasure was never gold. Perhaps it was knowledge, scrolls of forgotten wisdom, fragments of mystical traditions, insights gathered from Jews, Muslims, Christians, and heretics alike. Knowledge that could not be spoken openly, but that survived in ritual, symbol, and silence. If so, then the Templars were not merely warriors of Christendom, but custodians of something larger. A vision of truth that moved across borders and outlived fire. Or perhaps their power lay not in knowledge, but in perception. By guarding secrets, whether real or imagined, they created an aura that kings feared and commoners revered. Secrecy itself was their treasure, and in guarding it, they created a legacy more enduring than any fortress or vault. And yet, for all the speculation, the simplest truth may be this: they embody the human hunger for mystery. The Templars fascinate us not because we know what they found, but because we do not. Their story is a mirror for our questions: the Ark, the Grail, hidden manuscripts, lost treasure. Each possibility reflects a longing for something beyond the ordinary, a sense that the world holds secrets just out of reach. In the ruins of their castles, in the carvings of cathedrals, in the rituals of Freemasons, in the whispers of secret societies, fragments of their legend remain. Some fragments may be real, others invention, but together they form a tapestry that has outlasted empires. Whether through fact or fiction, the Templars became symbols of what lies hidden, of what survives in silence. The curse of Jacques de Molay still echoes, reminding us that injustice breeds legend and that memory can become more powerful than armies. The missing treasure still haunts seekers, reminding us that absence invites imagination. The strange geometry of cathedrals still puzzles scholars, reminding us that meaning can be carved into stone even if its code is lost. The Red Cross still flies, painted on the sails of explorers, reminding us that the past flows into the future in ways unseen. And so the Templar story ends not with closure, but with opening. They are gone, yet not gone. Their banners are torn, yet their symbols survive. Their order dissolved, yet their legend reborn in countless forms. Perhaps that is the final secret, that immortality is not found in gold or relics, but in story. To live in the imagination of generations is to outlast death itself. The Templars, whether they found hidden treasure or not, achieved this. Their silence became their voice, their absence their presence, their fall their transformation. We are left with questions, and questions are the true inheritance of the Order. Did they hold the Ark? Did they guard the Grail? Did they carry maps of undiscovered worlds? Did they preserve fragments of wisdom too dangerous to reveal? No answer satisfies, and so the mystery endures. Perhaps that is how they intended it, for in mystery lies power. And so, 8 centuries later, we find ourselves still tracing their steps, still peering into shadows, still asking the same questions that flickered in the torchlight of Jerusalem's tunnels. What did the Knights Templar truly find beneath the Temple Mount? And why, after so long, does the silence still speak?